Welcome, everybody. How are you doing? Afternoon, ready for the show? It's almost there, right? So I have two great guests here, and we're going to talk about omnichannel retailing. Before we go into that, we get our guests to introduce themselves. My name is Nabil. I'm the VP of e-commerce at DHL Supply Chain. I like to define my job as to spending my time trying to get your stuff faster, cheaper, and in a better, more convenient way. I think many of us are trying to do that for everybody, so that's what we do for a living. And I've been in the industry for 14 years. I'm based in the US, and you will notice from my accent, I'm not from the US. I'm from Europe, from France. Very nice to see you guys. Rob, please.
Hello, my name is Rob Hahn. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of WhiteBox. WhiteBox is a tech-enabled services company that kind of does three things. One, we're a 3PL, so we do direct-to-consumer fulfillment. Second, we do marketplace advertising and listings and management for brands. And then last, we absorb an enormous amount of data from both sides. And really our value proposition is not only doing those two practical things, but using data across those transactions in order to do things on behalf of a brand. So take stuff from the advertising data and use it in fulfillment, take fulfillment data and use it in advertising. We do both those independently, and we are a customer of DHL actually, so it's my job to make sure he keeps shipping stuff faster and faster to customers. But that's WhiteBox. I spent 8 years at Amazon. I started as an undergraduate intern and left as director of operations in the Amazon Robotics Fulfillment Center and left to join WhiteBox 3 years ago. I look like I'm 15, but I've been doing this for over a decade, and I'm like 128 in Amazon years. So that's me.
That's a good one. Padhu Raman, Chief Product Officer and founding partner at ProjectVerte. Been in this supply chain, e-commerce, logistics, almost shy of 25 years currently. About ProjectVerte, we are a cloud-based supply chain platform provider powered through AI. We primarily enable brands, brand aggregators, 3PLs, and any manufacturers, anybody in the logistics, enabling them to have a better connectivity across the platform, all the trading partners, and also focusing on the back-end execution operations, and then providing a good focus of enabling them to have a better visibility of end-to-end supply chain process. In addition, we have our own fulfillment centers as well, plus we network with partner fulfillment centers who either use our technology or integrate into our technology. So that way, the end-to-end supply chain from a technology perspective is covered.
Great, guys. Thank you for the intro. So I think we have two great complementary perspectives in the panel, so we'll take really advantage of that. And let's start with the question. I was in an event recently where there was a huge debate around the term omnichannel and if actually that term should even exist, and should we talk about omnichannel anymore. I have my own opinion, but we'll ask our panelists to first tell us what do they think about omnichannel, how do they define omnichannel, and maybe some of the major trends they see in the space. Maybe let's start, Robert, with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think omnichannel originally meant more than one channel, and then they were like, there's 3 channels, and now that's not real life. So I think omnichannel today is more like lots of channels. I think is how I would define that. And the reality is the world has changed, obviously. Everyone in here, that's not news. If it shocks you, then I don't know where you've been. But the reality is a brand today has to navigate not only selling it to a distributor and then it going to the shelf, but obviously it's just the fact that they have to navigate more than one thing. And it's not just an extra piece. It is actually a fundamentally different strategy that's required, from sourcing all the way through packaging, through omnichannel is more of a catalyst for a brand that they need to change the way that they've been thinking. So it's a lot less about, are you in every single place in the world, but you're in more than one? And e-commerce, for example, is one of those channels, is a fundamentally different one from traditional distribution and retail. And I think really the biggest challenge that brands have is the fact that it's not, it is just, it's a fundamentally different problem that they're solving. And these large, older legacy corporations, making that transition to something that is different is extraordinarily challenging. They're just simply not built from logistics all the way through their financial systems to make that change. So I think omnichannel is so daunting as a concept, because if it's more than one channel, it's just as complicated as 100. So I think really as we think about what omnichannel means to a brand today, it means something very different from a born D2C brand than it does for a traditional brand. But if omnichannel is more about traditional brands than it is direct to consumer. So I think that's my take.
Yeah, great, Robert. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think you touched on the importance of the amount of channels that are being actually executed. You know, I mean, we recently implemented some businesses where we have more than 10 channels, which have, every single one has its own business requirement, SLAs, packaging, and so that starts to add a huge level of complexity. And how do you unify your operations process, sourcing, and so on for all these different rules? But how do you see that? What do you see in your space?
I think, take Rob's point as well. I see the omni-channel as evolving, right? If you think about last century, we were more focused, or the entire retail was more focused on experience. You have stores, how the customers interact in the stores, and how they shop around the stores. That's why it developed. And all their supply chain was scattered towards that framework of thought process. In the last decade or so, as the e-commerce evolved, with Amazon being the prime, convenience became the factor, right? So now your your inventory, your supply chain framework, all march towards that aspect of it. Now you are expanding into more of engaging the customers. Now, because your channels of sales have changed, and customers want you to be everywhere, brands want to be in everywhere. Now we have stores, physical brick and mortar, you have e-commerce, you have G-commerce, you have virtual reality, you have social commerce. I mean, wherever the customer is going to engage, brands want to engage, right? And that is going to be the continuous process that's going to happen. And that is where I think omnichannel is evolving. So what does it mean, right? So as the expansion is happening, the factors of inventory becomes a challenge, right? How do I distribute my inventory across all these channels? Which channels inventory is more priority? Where I am going to engage with the customer? How do I deliver the customer? In my traditional model, I always go to a store, I pick up. Now, how closer I can be to the customer? That becomes a big question. And how faster or cheaper I can deliver. And all these things has to talk to each other, right? My demand channel connectivity, my focus towards better provisioning of inventory, I have a common pool of inventory distributed across. I have my better fulfillment capability, because as I'm satisfying or supplying or servicing across channels, my complexity and fulfillment becomes more complex, right? And then my last mile delivery, how do I deliver in different methods? And that is where I think it will continue to evolve. And the other aspect is looking at sustainability. So omnichannel will evolve continuously. Traditional omnichannel naming was more of multi-channel retail, morphed into an omnichannel. So that's where our take is from an omnichannel perspective.
Great, thank you, Padhu. And Padhu, I think just let's keep with you, because I think you already touched on some of the elements, but you enable technology, right, for companies to go through that process. Talk to us about some of the challenges and enablers to go through that journey, right? Because it is not, definitely not a destination, right? It's a continuous process. I mean, you talk just what you mentioned, social commerce, mobile commerce, I mean, the metaverse and all these things that are continuously evolving. What are the main challenges, enablers that we should be thinking of in the process?
Broadly, if you think about, there are three major pillars of problems, right? Or not problems, but the solutions that needs to cater, right? The challenges the brick and mortar face when they move from omni-channel. Primarily your inventory. I'll give you a specific use case. We have a brand and a retailer. When they started moving from a retail to an e-commerce, fundamentally they had different SKU naming for the same style, same product, different SKU classification. Now, how do you distribute the inventory or plan your inventory by channel? And the COVID hit in the recent days, right? So I have all my inventory locked up in a brick and mortar channel in a store. Now I want to change my selling channel to e-commerce because e-commerce picked up. now the inventory is not shared. Right? So the fundamental problem is my SKU naming convention is different. My inventory has been locked into different channels. So how do we solve these problems, right? So that is where you get inventory as one major channel. Technology can solve by enabling a one common procurement of inventory, virtualization of inventory across demand channels as you go from e-commerce to G-commerce to mini social commerce. The second is, how do you make the concept of omnichannel has moved away from a single enterprise to multi-enterprise, right? So we are talking to different providers, because traditionally as a retailer or a brand, I may have my own store, I may have my own website, but now with G-commerce, with demand channels, I want to sell in Amazon, I want to sell in Walmart, I want to sell in Target, your enterprise has changed. So how do you connect? So integration becomes your second problem. So inventory management in a better way, your integration management in a better way, then delivery. How do I connect to my delivery methods? Because now traditionally I'm not picking, customers are not picking from stores. Now not only delivering to the home, I may buy online, pick up in store. I may buy in store, deliver to my home, right? Or deliver anywhere. So all the complexity has changed. So technology plays a very important role in integrating all these things. So you need to have a strong platform which can understand the demand channel data, distribution and fulfillment data, as Rob said, last mile delivery data, connecting all these things. And also the model has changed to more from returns as well. How do you monetize on the re-commerce side, recover profits? Because there are business models which primarily focuses on sending products, trying on, and returning back. That's an accepted model as well. So now how do you get those products back into the channel from a sale aspect as well? So I think all these problems enabled through technology, which can talk, have a centralized data with a decentralized execution, is what is going to solve the problem.
Great, thank you. I think, one of the things that you mentioned, I think that resonates strongly with me is the topic of integration and how do you connect the different technologies and silos and departments that you have in organizations. I think that's definitely something that I see a lot. What do you see, Robert, in main challenges? And that's what you do for a living, helping companies to go through that process. So.
Yeah, the fundamental problems that you've identified, absolutely agree with those. I think the most important thing is that when you think about solving the problems you just talked about, integration, inventory, and delivery, it is not enough to just know information. It's not enough to see it on a page. It's not enough to be able to know things. You have to be able to do something with that insight. I think we've gone through this. I think we've gotten to the next step, or we're heading very quickly to the next step of who's going to add the most value in this space for brands. And it's really, we went to this more SaaS model, right? So these bunch of SaaS tools in the last 15 years that essentially would tell you where your things are. And the problem with that, I think fundamentally, and that's where I made the leap from Amazon actually to WhiteBox, was it's not enough to know the things. The complexity of the problems that you're solving just alone on the Amazon is extraordinarily challenging for a brand, let alone all of the other problems they need to solve. So really what you need to be able to do is actually do something with that information. And I think that part is I'm going to use the word today, almost impossible for a brand to be able to navigate by themselves. So I think that's why we've gone down the path of services. Like, we want to do something for you, not just tell you about a thing. So the marriage of getting the information, knowing what to do with it, and then actually actually doing that. Like the brand, unless you're going to have your own warehouse to be able to store inventory, to be able to do dropship, which is a massive opportunity in the space that I expect to absolutely explode in the coming years. Who's going to do dropship for you? If you've got a traditional retailer, a lot of those don't do direct-to-consumer dropship. Some of your newer, fancier direct-to-consumer only built networks are also not integrated in the type of way that they can use the same type of networks. So a brand has massive problems in front of them, not just understanding what the problem is, but actually going to execute that. And that's where there's a big opportunity in this space for partners that can have a more holistic approach for a brand that can do direct-to-consumer, B2B, dropship, and are agnostic to wherever that order comes in. That is where brands need to set themselves up.
Great. Any companies that you see in the space? Because also I think there is two ways journey, right? You have the digitally native companies that go and look at, well, how do I expand my reach through multiple channels? And then you have the traditional brick and mortar organizations that are also going and expanding the channels. Any example, I don't know if you can name it, but just like conceptually what they've done of companies that have done a good job, and maybe you could continue with you, Robert, on the moving from a digitally native company into really becoming a truly omni-channel company. Any example and what they've done better maybe than the others?
Yeah, I think one of the things I just talked about is Dropship. I want to zoom in on that just for a second. I think one of the very incredibly cool opportunities that exist for digitally native brands and traditional brands is the Dropship opportunity. The Dropship essentially, that's a Walmart and Amazon or whomever, right? Using the eyes that are already on their website. They don't have to touch the inventory. They don't need to do all the things. Like Amazon set the tone here with allowing brands, actually not allowing, expecting, forcing brands to own the content and advertising on the platform they've created. They're just pulling in eyeballs, and the rest is up to a brand. That concept is super powerful. It's terrifying for a traditional brand. It's amazing for a digitally native brand. As retailers and marketplaces lean toward that way, that's what the opportunity is really there. So I think some brands that we work with that have made that transition from a digitally native brand to getting into the space is trying and having the ability ranging from a 3PL to the systems and tools in place to be able to get to the point where they can try things. And Dropship allows a retailer to say on Target.com, sure, I don't need to touch this, and I would love for your thing to be on Target.com or Amazon or whatever that would be. Like it unlocks this retail opportunity that you can get into more doors without actually touching product, and it gets to sit on the same pallet in the same warehouse at your 3PL. So I think that navigation from the old world of getting these relationships with distributors, certainly important. Physical retail is not going away. It is not like that is not a thing that's going to happen, right? It's changing, it's shifting. It may have fewer percentage points of the overall, but it is not going anywhere. It's important. But that the digitally native brands getting into low-cost opportunities that they don't need to sell 9 million things to be able to do that are the teams that or the brands that have done this really, really well. Leveraging those opportunities with Dropship specifically, I think, is a really good in for a lot of those smaller brands.
Great. So I think there is a combination of, if I try to summarize, really a combination of Dropship and also through marketplaces to access and to go to a much bigger consumer base. I mean, we've seen actually marketplaces growing faster than the overall market, right? Over the last 5 years, right? So with a huge amount of organizations going into the space, I think that's certainly something that we continue to see. Padhu, on your side, any of your clients that is doing a great job in the journey that are doing something very unique or different?
There are, one other aspect too, as Bob said, right? So when the brands migrate from digital native or from the retail back to more of an other commerce, the key thing that they all have challenge is the change management as well, right? Because when I am building a brand from a retail perspective, I only need certain attributes of the product, and I'm able to sell in a store. That thought process is different, and the execution methodology is different. But when I am transferring, or a brand is transferring to a digital native or a social commerce or a different aspects, the product attributes completely change. So the change management, understanding, and how people figure out and how the technology can help with that, those brands have really done well, right? Because one, I need to understand the interoperability across my channels, what each channels need, and how do I prep the product from the beginning? Because if you have your inbound correct, your outbound is going to be always correct. Generally, right? So that means, right, thinking the strategy of saying, okay, I'm going to be an omni-channel, that I'm going to have a multi-channel in all my presence in all the channels, what each channels require, prepping the product from the procurement standpoint, from the manufacturing standpoint, all the brands who have looked at from that perspective, they have really done well from our experience and changing the strategy.
Yeah, I think you also touched on the change management. I think I see it a lot. I mean, just before COVID, I remember in December 2019, I got the chance to pitch our e-commerce fulfillment and last mile offering to a very large retailer in Latin America. And I'll never forget that comment. So at the end of the presentation, the most senior person in the room told me, Nabil, all this is nice, but the online channel is 3% of our business. And so I said, yeah, and? He's like, yeah, it's not what's going to make our results. He probably has changed his mind since then, right? I mean, that was just before COVID. I didn't speak to him since then, but I think the evolution of the business and how fast things are going and how do you evolve, particularly when you're a successful organization. I said, because when you're a successful organization, it's really hard to challenge yourself and really consider, because technically you're doing the right things, right? And if you're doing good, it's actually really hard to go and say, well, we're doing great, but we are maybe not evolving fast enough, right? And I think it's that mindset change is really important in the process.
One thing I just want to add to that, right? If they're not looking at engaging the customer, because the customer is today and the customer is demanding, right? If that's a key thing. If I am we did one of the brands, we did technology deployment on G-commerce, right? So what they do is they give video games, and as part of the video games, they advertise, they give points. Those points can get converted into actual merchandise, and then major brands like Nike and everybody are advertising in those G-commerce, right? If a brand remains in our channel and tries to be in that channel, not realizing the change management, at some point they have to rethink the business, right? Because today's game is everybody has to be in wherever your customer is, and customer is everywhere, right? And they want the same way, right? And the key aspect is the experience as well comes into play, where if I am a customer, if I am in one brand or one engagement channel, and I'm shifting between multiple channels, I need to have the same information, whether it's a product attributes, price, experience, that should continue. And brands which don't migrate, that's going to be a challenge.
If I can actually, I think an interesting thing is, in my opinion, that's a first world problem to have to worry about your change management. I think what you said is the most impactful of all of them. If I can't even identify that it's a problem for a brand, I'm never the e-commerce change is not about e-commerce. It is about the explosion of consumer choice. You touched it there, right? Like, it is the fact that 25 years ago, I walked down and I had 3 different laundry detergents to choose from. And now I go online and there's 978 billion of them. Like, I don't, obviously hyperbole, but maybe, I don't know. But like my point is like that explosion of opportunity for challenger brands is the problem. It's not the fact that it's 3% today. It's that you are getting fewer eyeballs than you got last time. So today is 3%, and it's not like, well, next year's gonna be 4%. It's just, it's sprinting that direction. So thinking about packaging size and like that, like getting to the point where change management is actually the biggest problem, in my opinion, like that's not the biggest problem. Once you've decided that you have to solve a problem, it becomes it, but that is not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is identification. This is like identification and what to do with it. I think that's the most impactful thing that a brand can do, and usually it's too late because it's these big brands, these big traditional brands. If I can give an interesting example, so we work with Ricola. They'd be okay with me saying this. So Ricola's a big traditional brand. They're great, super, incredibly nice people. But one of the problems they had initially is the fact that their financial system is only set up for cases. And they were like, what do? We don't do eaches. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, the people online are not just, like on Amazon, are not just gonna buy cases of Ricola. Like, it was such a foreign concept for them. Like, that identification that what you have today is broken, fundamentally is a huge problem for brands. It is the thing that everybody has to get over to make fundamental change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, let's assume that you've gone through that process and you're already ahead, right? And so I think you bringing this words is great because it really transitioned good into the what's next, right? How do you operationalize? So you set the strategy. How do you operationalize? And we know logistics. We have a lot of logistics people around, right? most of us, I guess, I hope. How do you operationalize the logistic of this, right? I mean, the case picking is like really, it's a great example. But you see also the impact of servicing direct consumers, right? Because we go into meetings and people in operations might tell you, oh, we have 98% service level. Like, well, that's great. But if you're shipping 100,000 products per day, you have 2,000 consumers that are not going to get their stuff. That doesn't seem right, right? And so how do you look at logistics for the customers you serve, and how critical it is to really do that effectively?
Yeah, I think I think first of all, for a brand, when I talk to large brands and they are trying to make this decision of building or buying, is the first step here. And the reality is, it's super challenging to do. What is out there is today, there's a few of us that can do it really well because it's really, really hard. And then it's hard to get the information, it's hard to do the integration. There's 56 different APIs and 20,000 different EDI formats of blah, blah, blah. Like those of us that have done it, for those big brands, don't try it yourself. Find a partner who can do it for you and do it with you, because it will get you faster. Like, you will have to learn all the mistakes that I've made, I'm sure that you've made. You're gonna have to learn them yourself. Don't do it. Get somebody who knows how to do it right now. Maybe 20 years from now, everybody can do it themselves. Today, right now, don't get cute. Run 1,000 miles an hour with somebody else that can do it for you and with you. The second part of that is consumers went from picking it on a shelf to ordering something and then it took 38 days to get there. They didn't care in the early days of e-commerce, to Amazon breaking the world, and I'm upset if it takes me more than 2 hours and 12 minutes. It's more important to know when something gets there. If you've ever purchased on Amazon, if you're a human, I'm sure you have, it's more important that you know the day that it's going to come than it is that it's 2 days, 1 day, or 5 days. That's what Amazon proved. So I think the biggest thing is managing consumer expectations. That varies very much by marketplace, sometimes dictated by the marketplace, sometimes by you. But one of the biggest things that brands have to navigate is how they interact with their customers. Because if 2,000 customers, it doesn't ship on time, but it still gets there on time, they're still happy customers. So management expectation for consumers from the moment that they hit the order button is critical for brands. It's one of the first things they need to tackle.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Like certainty in what you can deliver. Padhu, what do you see on your side from the logistics?
I think to really operationalize the end-to-end, right? So you need to have a good platform. So one, you need to onboard to a platform which can connect you to all the demand channels easily and simply, right? So you do once, and then you forget for life, right? Because that is the platform will enable, because the world is going to change in terms of platforms. If you think about it, I have demand channel connectivity platform, we have a communications platform, because you want to engage the customer. So you may engage with a phone, you may engage with a voice call, you may engage with on your video reality. So how do you really manage that, right? So the world is moving towards a platform-based solution, connecting in all the cloud. You have a demand channel connectivity, you have payment connectivity, you have a communication protocol connectivity, right, where you go to one platform, it can communicate through different means. You have fulfillment networks, whether you get into one fulfillment network or multiple fulfillment networks, delivery management, where you get into one delivery management that takes care of the parcel or LTL or TL. You are encapsulated from that perspective. Similarly, returns, you get into so how do you, the way it operationalizes to connect all these into one centralized platform, provide the data visibility, and make it a decentralized execution.
Great. Thank you for that. I think we are almost on time, and I was told that we need to be on time here. So, a last comment on a bold prediction of what you think is going to happen in the future of retail and omnichannel specifically next 4-5 years.
I think what I said before is true, and that is physical retail has its place. I think the way we interact with traditional physical retailers is going to be focused on like a massive lift in dropship opportunities over the next few years. You'll see consolidation in stuff like third-party sellers on Amazon as people drop out there, and you start to get larger companies having really focused on that customer experience. So Amazon getting more restrictive and more homogenous with what a Walmart or a Target starts to present from a customer experience perspective.
Great. Padhu?
Consolidation and collaboration. That is the future, and in future, immediate future will be is more of distributed fulfillment network. And the 5G is also going to make a big change in how the omnichannel retail is going to come out.
Great. And I'll finish with mine. I think we're just getting started. I think the amount of channels we're going to see are just going to explode. We have a couple of customers that are preparing themselves for 50 to 100 channels. I'm not talking about like underlying channels. I'm talking about like significant channels between social commerce and so on. So definitely more to come there, more complexity, and more things for us to all solve together. So thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the party tonight. And we'll be here, I think, for any question or for a chat if anybody is interested. Thank you for joining us. Cheers.